Hi everyone, welcome to episode 9 of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Today's guest is Rosie Mansfield. Rosie is the CEO of Premier TEFL. Rosie started her career with I2I TEFL, and they were responsible for creating the world's first online TEFL training course. Following that, she was Director of Operations for TEFL Express. And over that time, she developed her own entrepreneurial and innovative skills to form Premier TEFL with Ian O'Sullivan, which she's been running for 5 years now.
Hey everyone, buckle up for a new episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, the one and only podcast made to help you launch your business or take your existing business to a level of success you could never have imagined. Whether you're a school owner, freelancer, publisher, or other entrepreneur, you're sure to pick up lots of actionable advice when you listen to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Remember to visit eflmagazine.com for great articles and features. Without further ado, here's your host, the founder of EFL Magazine, Philip Pound.
Hello everybody, welcome to the latest show, the latest episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. I've been busy this week and I'm really delighted to have Rosie Mansfield with me today. And Rosie is the MD, CEO of Premier TEFL. Is that right, Rosie? I should have asked that question beforehand.
That's fine. I think Chief Tea Maker is also a title I've been given too. Yeah, it's lovely to be here today. Thanks so much for inviting me.
No problem. I'm delighted. Always happy to speak to you. So yes, first of all, I suppose the most obvious question is, where is the TEFL industry now? How is it in these times?
The interesting thing is that I can nearly track back by the day in 2020, the trepidation and fear I felt for the TEFL industry as the coronavirus was moving west. And I remember sitting at my desk, Philip, on the 26th of January last year, only a few days to the anniversary of it. And I suddenly got this real sinking feeling that we were going to be in trouble and that the whole industry was going to be in trouble, because we had just sent out teachers to Vietnam and we were about to send out teachers to China for the new semesters that were just kicking off. And this talk about the virus was circulating and it was feeding into mainstream media. And I sat at my desk and I could see it in my mind's eye. I could hear that the phones were ringing and the teachers wanted to come home already at that point. And I knew there was going to be this domino effect. That's when it kind of sunk in, that we were going to have this wave coming from the east to the west of all the teachers. Schools were going to close, teachers were going to come home. And then what I didn't realise, and I didn't know for many weeks after that, was that by the time that the east was ready to have teachers go back, nobody in the west would be able to travel. And so, and that's a very linear explanation of East and West, and it's not always like that. We know that, but I could just see that for us, especially in Premier TEFL, that most of the teachers that go on our first-time teacher internship placements are going from North America, South Africa, Europe, and they're mostly going to Southeast Asia. So I think that at that time I was very much worried about the industry, but it was I actually didn't foresee that it was going to pivot like that and that everything would move online and that everything would continue. And I should have known that, because we know that there is absolutely no way to quench the thirst for the demand of English lessons. No economy crash, no recession, and now we know not even a pandemic can reduce the demand for English language lessons. And so that's great. It's great not only for people who are in a business that is offering TEFL training or is supplying teachers, it's great for individual teachers. It's also good for learners, because at the end of the day, we know that by learning the English language, it will change the life and the path and the forecast of the future of anybody. It is going to give them freedom and power and the ability to take control of their career as they grow and develop. So I'm delighted to say that I firmly believe that the TEFL industry is in a safe place. And I think that what the last year has done is opened up more opportunities in lots of different ways, not just online, but this hybrid version of being able to offer people training online, that you now really can work from anywhere that you have the internet. And 2019, we definitely saw the rise of the online platforms and the ability to teach English online. But 2020 has really concreted that into EFL history, I think.
And tell me about Premier TEFL pre-COVID. Where were you? Trainings, placements, internships? What was the company doing at that time?
That's actually primarily the space we were in. So the idea for Premier TEFL was to create a TEFL training organisation that was a bit fresher. A lot of companies have been around for, the original people had been around for a good amount of time, and there wasn't much new activity happening. Nobody was reinventing or recycling or reimagining how we could do things. So that was the, I suppose, the catalyst for Premier TEFL to be formed. And at that time, before pre-COVID, as we say, we were sending quite a lot of people abroad on the first-time placement. So we established ourselves as a place for first-time teachers, a safe place for people who could get into the world of TEFL in a nice, gentle way with quality training, and then have that stepping stone in the form of about 15 different internship locations that would then allow them to catapult themselves into the mainstream TEFL job market. And it was, we were servicing people who were probably around the age of about 24 to 32, but the average age was about 28. So people who had maybe studied something at university, had come out, probably gotten a job that wasn't quite in their area, or they found out that they didn't really want to do this for the rest of their life. And they were then at a position where they wanted to take a break and try something new. And I think that teaching English as a foreign language really does serve so many English speakers for that purpose in their lifetime. So many people do this for a short amount of time, and that's great. That's a great thing about it. We need the stalwart, passionate people who will do it for their whole career, but we also still need people who will dip in and out and bring other expertise to the table too. So we were training people primarily online at that stage. We did have practical sessions that were usually sort of purchased or booked by groups, maybe city councils for EAL specific training, or schools that had a group of people together who wanted to do some practical teacher training. And then for the most part, yes, we were sending people on the internships, and we had a few job partners. And the world of TEFL recruitment is huge. And I think for us, what we wanted to do was handpick a couple of employers that we worked with that had a decent amount of availability, and our first-time teachers would be inducted into the world of working in TEFL in these fully supported placements. So that was the space we were in, and growing nicely, growing year on year, and getting new learners and producing more graduate TEFL teachers. And I think, we had just started out with what we call, it's called the one-page strategic plan for the entrepreneurs listening, and it's in one of my favourite books. We might talk about that in a while. In that January, I had my fresh 2020 one-page strategic plan of everything that I wanted to achieve that year, and by March it was in the bin. It was, there was nothing. We were strapped into a roller coaster, an involuntary roller coaster, and we just had to ride that out, and we didn't realize that we'd be still riding it now. But it was a good test. It was a good test of our adapting skills. It was a good test of our teamwork, and good test of reinforcing that we really believe in what we're doing.
And so we talked a little bit about post-COVID, or the situation where you're at now. It's gone very much online. And so you mentioned the pivot. Just tell me about that.
Sure. And it's interesting because March 2020, I sat at my desk And I kind of put blinkers on, not to ignore the situation, but to absolutely focus on the situation. Because in all honesty, I believed that we were going to hit a wall of some description quite soon. So I could see that all our teachers wanted to come home, schools were closing, semesters were being cancelled. And so we had all these teachers lined up to go abroad at different months of the year to different destinations, and the wheels were coming off, before my very eyes. And so I sat down at my desk and I shut out the rest of the business, and I started making what I called the COVID disaster plan. And I started planning out strategies for how we were going to cope with when things were going wrong. And I did that for probably a week or so. And I didn't engage with the day-to-day business activities, and it was coming to the end of March, and I was planning for people working remotely, and we were planning about getting equipment to people's homes and who had good internet, and we're also talking about making sure that even your desk, who had a desk, who could sit at an ergonomic situation, did you have light and fresh air coming into where you would be working? Like, all of these things were going through my mind, and I was planning out training for staff and also how we would keep in contact with each other. And while that happened and I was focused in that and my head was buried in it, Philip, we had one of the best months on record. It was as big a surprise to me as anybody else. And I think, we're talking about entrepreneurship and business. And, I think one thing is, if people can always admit when either something unusual happens or they make a mistake, it gives reassurance to other entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs out there that you won't know it all. Even if you've been in an industry for 15 years, I still had the rug pulled out from under me at that moment, because I was honestly feeling like we were going towards a problem. And in the end, the rest of the world had already started to cop on that there was going to be a surge in demand for online lessons. And so we saw March was a great month for us, March 2020. That went on into April and May. So it was actually very enjoyable. We started working remotely in the middle of March. The phones rang off the hook for about 2 months. And what I mean by that, not that we weren't in the office, I mean we were so busy, the phones were ringing constantly. Everybody who had access to pick up a phone was picking up a phone. And it was wonderful. So I have to say that for Premier TEFL and for the staff and for our customers at that time and for our learners, it was actually a good time, because when the real world was not in a good place and where other people were losing their jobs and were maybe trying to work out how they would be paying their mortgage and real life struggles like that, we were at our laptops and it was busy. And so it was brilliant for that time. What we saw was a lot of people who either had probably thought about doing a TEFL course in the past and had put it to the back burner. We saw people who were doing a little bit of teaching online and now wanted to focus on that because they were furloughed or they had been made redundant from their job or their business had closed. And we saw people who worked in completely abstract industries who were now looking to TEFL as one of the leading ways that you could work online from home, get trained from home, and then start working from home. So that period of what we call the first lockdown was brilliant, and we saw a massive surge. Now, we knew that couldn't last forever, and we did see that roller coaster spike come back down again towards the end of the year, because I think what happened then was there was a period, certainly in this neck of the woods, where we came out of lockdown a bit and people had a bit more freedom. So they had more choices and more things to do. And then another wave of lockdowns came. And I think that brought a lot of fear, because we were also edging closer to the winter. And people were at home and they were starting to think this could stretch in probably to Christmas. And I think that, not only physically but mentally, I feel like that was probably a darker time for people, and they weren't as buoyant in their problem solving activities and thinking, okay, I'm going to pivot my career, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to get into teaching English. I think the second wave of lockdown, people probably just went into hibernation a bit. But I have to say, we've come through that now, and typically January would be a wonderful month for people deciding to make this their year of English teaching. And so January is usually a busy month for us, and I'm pleased to say that it has been busy so far.
Fantastic. So you mentioned a little bit about your students. So traditionally, we have the idea of TEFL students being maybe new graduates or people on gap years, maybe even doing internships in the UK, doing gap years, and maybe retirees was a new market that I heard about, a new demographic coming on board. But that's changed now. There are different.
It has. Now, I would still say that people in their late 20s are still a large group of our students. So maybe around 28, 29, that does form a lot. But it's not the typical 21-year-old, literally just graduated, don't want to go to work. This sounds like it's a bit of an escape. It's not. We're not seeing that as a core market right now. We're definitely seeing people who are a bit more considered about this move, and also people who are really entrepreneurial in their own right. I still love to pick up the phone to people. I couldn't be running this organization and not get to talk to people who are potential customers. So when the team let me, they still give me a spin on the phones, and I hear the most interesting stories. I hear stories about people who are living in the UK, maybe not from the UK, could be from Asia or other countries, but have made the UK their home, are established in their own right in some kind of career, and they also then want to do coaching, for example, IELTS exam coaching. And they'll maybe link back to their home country, which will be the source of students. And then they'll be delighted to work with somebody who's living and working in the UK and, established in their own right. And so we see a lot of people who are developing their own niche businesses in teaching English, and also people coming from all kinds of highly educated walks of life. For example, and these are real examples because these are people that we talk to or that we interview for our own blog, so that we can give examples of the types of path that you can walk with this. But we had one chap who was a Canadian lawyer, and he relocated to France, and because obviously with the Canadian French, it was an easy move for him from that perspective, but he couldn't practice law. So what he did was he was developing a niche business in teaching legal English. And that's something that could be very lucrative. So when we're thinking about people getting into the world of teaching English and doing their TEFL certificate, it's not all this kind of entry-level general English work is what the aim is. They're not blindly going into this. A lot of these people have a very clued-in approach to getting a good qualification. So a lot of people looking at the CELTA in the level 5 online course, getting that so that they have an English government regulated teaching qualification, and then pairing that with their existing career and really creating a very strong proposition for English learners. And at the end of the day, if you're going to the doctor, you'd prefer to see a consultant than a general practitioner. And it's going to be the same as we develop this path with TEFL, that if you can see a specialist in the teaching sort of area that you want to learn in, you're going to be willing to pay that little bit extra. And so that's what I tell people all the time. Doing your TEFL course is one part of the journey. You've got to put together all the other valuable assets or elements that you have from your career and your knowledge, and then try and specialize, because that's where you will really make this into a lucrative career choice.
And this is something I had a chat with Paul Salloway. He's running a marketing company for TEFL teachers here in Tokyo. And Paul actually recounted a story. One of his acquaintances, she started an online business teaching landscape architects. She's a landscape architect, and she's built this niche, a very lucrative niche in, teaching English to landscape architects around the world. So, you can even niche down a little bit more, landscape architecture. I'm sure there are fewer than there are lawyers, for example. Of course, you can niche down in law. And the other side of things is perhaps for listeners who want to become online teachers, this is fantastic knowledge to have. Another listener we may have to the podcast would be business owners and people who are looking to recruit students from abroad. So where do you see that more long term? As in, for example, if the business is based in Europe or US, Australia, or in Southeast Asia, East Asia, that's a big question, obviously. But if you can kind of give me some, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about marketing as a whole, I think that the digital space has been a gift to us in the last 10 years. And, I come from an era where I used to fill up a car and I used to drive around Ireland with brochures. And I used to give out physical brochures at coffee shops and at post offices and things like that. So I think having come through that period of trying to recruit customers, whether they're learners for your own classes or whether they're learners for your course, it's the same. So whether there's a business person listening and they want to run their own TEFL training, or they're trying to recruit learners for their lessons, the premise is the same. You've got to establish an audience, essentially. So what I tell people when I talk about this is, think about your customer persona. Think about the type of person who is going to be your be your customer, and draw it out. Give that persona a name, give them an average age, think about what their current salary is and what their current job title is, and then sit down and work out, where do these people live online? So is it Facebook or is it Instagram? Are they on TikTok? Do they go on discussion boards? Are they in Facebook groups, but they're not really on active pages? Ask yourself, where do these people live and inhabit an online space? And once you understand that, you can design your messaging and your campaigns for how to reach and contact those people. And you need to tailor your message to suit not only the platform that you're going to advertise on, but also the type of person within those personas, because sometimes you'll have a male and a female version, and maybe that you need to communicate with them differently. But I think in terms of marketing, you really do need to consider the key channels. Even if you're a small business owner, you can still get a very good return on your investment from Facebook advertising, but you need to have an audience that's trackable. Otherwise, it's quite expensive because you're kind of cold targeting people who don't know your brand. So I usually work in circles and put your own business in the center, and then look at the first circle around you and see, what is my existing network? Who is my existing audience? And how can I reach them online? And then the next audience out, or the next ring out, it's going to be a bit more expensive to reach those people, but if you have a website, then you need to make sure that it's optimized for Google or Baidu or whatever search engine is going to be used in the country that you're in. Okay, so you need to make sure that it's optimized. Do you ever remember the American movie Field of Dreams? Yeah,
build it and they will come. Is that right?
It's not the same for websites. It's that's kind of my my opening line. If you build it, they will come is not the same for websites. It must be optimized for search ranking, and so you need to do what's called on-site SEO, okay, search engine optimization. Then you also need to do off-site SEO, and what that involves is getting other websites of a good authority to link to yours. And that's difficult and it can be expensive. But what you want to do is essentially make sure that your website can be found. One of the biggest things I've learned in digital marketing is it actually doesn't matter that much how beautiful your website is if it is functional and can be found. And so when people are looking for anything in Google, and I say Google because that's what I use. If you're looking in Google, you're not going to scroll to the second page. You're barely going to make it to the end of the first page. So your primary function as a website owner is to get that ranked as close to the top of page 1 on Google for a certain amount of key terms that are relevant for your offering. If you can do that, You can work on the beauty and the design of that website afterwards, but it really has to be found first. Otherwise, it's just the most beautiful thing hidden in a sea of millions and trillions of websites. So that's one thing with the marketing. You have to get found, it's the whole purpose. And then I think you can definitely dabble in the likes of Facebook and Instagram marketing. You can teach yourself. There's a ton of YouTube videos on there. So if it's not your background, then watch tutorials on YouTube and then test out some campaigns. Definitely with Facebook, you don't learn it overnight. You do need to have a bit of a budget and you need to be prepared to test. So if attention to detail isn't your thing, maybe work with an organization or an agency to just run 1 or 2 campaigns for you and make sure that you either get new people to your website, or for the people who do come to your website, you can retarget them. And so bring them back, and say, hey, remember me, come back to my website and have a look at my offering. And you can also then use email marketing, do live webinars, which we do a lot of, and list your services on other websites. So there's a ton of options that you can do. I'm always keen to do as guerrilla style marketing as possible. So low cost. I think these big flashy campaigns don't always resonate with people. So try and get referrals, try and get advocates for your company. See if your customers are willing to be your advocates. And that will then provide a snowball effect and grow from there.
Fantastic. And it just brings to mind the bricks and mortar business. Sometimes people, they build an office, they want the best chairs and they want the nicest wallpaper and carpets, but they don't have any customers. It's kind of similar situation. So just going back a little bit now, we've kind of present day, we'll have a kind of a shimmering screen where we go back in time to Rosie's past. So tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from, and your career path and how you got into entrepreneurship.
For sure. I think probably if you ask people who went to school with me, they'd probably just label me as a bit of a geek in a nice way, like not a cool geek, but probably just like, I was accepted, 100%. I didn't have, I had a huge friend group and a wonderful experience in school, and I loved to learn. So, I wasn't one of the iconic people, the sort of top 1 or 2 people that are super beautiful and loved by everybody, but I had a good solid position in school, and I wanted to do something different, and I was shaped by my teachers in a way. I remember the career guidance teacher telling me that from my profile I should go into a maths degree and become an actress. And so I was sitting there and I was thinking, this guy has no idea who I am, and he's pinpointing me into a numbers game for the rest of my life. Anyway, I had this wonderful drama teacher, and she introduced, during the time I was in school, she introduced GCSEs and A-levels in drama and theatre. And so she kind of had a band of merry men that followed her. And we were the pilot project for that in quite an academic school, Philip. So there was a little bit of taboo, but probably that fed into my desire to be a bit different and kind of break the mold and things. So here I was studying economics, which fed into the brain boxy side of me. But then I also studied English literature and theatre studies. So it was a bit of a strange mix. And I can remember having meetings with people that said, you're kind of really, you're here with the math and the economics, and then you're also here with the English literature. So it was just what interested me at the time. Yeah, exactly. It was, it was just a weird combination. A bit like, jam and cheese on a sandwich, but it works. So off I went then to research my options for university. And it was, I suppose, by chance, by luck, whatever, I discovered the University of Stirling. So they offered a degree in English literature, and you could combine it with media studies. And so this sparked a lot of interest in my world, because I grew up wanting to be a foreign war correspondent. And as a kid, I used to sit and watch reports from the Bosnian War, and you'd see they'd be wearing like the UN flat jackets and the helmets, and they'd be doing this live news report about what was happening abroad at the time. And I just thought that had to be the most incredible career to do. So I was sort of following this path a bit, and I went to Stirling University in Northern Ireland, where I grew up. You couldn't combine the English literature with the media. You could do one or the other in different universities, but you couldn't get this hybrid approach. So off I went to Scotland, and I studied there for 4 years, and I loved it. I loved the dual aspect, and I still could take an elective in economics. So no, it's not. It was only an hour on the plane, and it was a wonderful experience to get out and technically live abroad, even though you were still in the same kind of area. So that was the start of my travels. And so I came out of university, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did decide that I wasn't going to move down to London and try and make it in the media rat race, because by that stage I had enough experience to know that I probably wasn't going to do that for very long. And so I actually moved to Southern Ireland then after that. And by researching the job opportunities in that area, I came across two sort of front runners as such. One was at the local radio station, and another was in a company that looked very, very exciting and sort of very unique, and it was called Eye to Eye. And so this is in the middle of 2000.
That's where I first met you, wasn't it, Rosie?
Right.
When I was working
Correct.
for Sunday Business Post newspaper, and just actually brings back the whole discussion we had earlier about targeting and measuring. And
yes,
you know, that's a major disadvantage for newspaper. You put it
absolutely.
up, and who looks at it? What kind of response do you get? How successful is it? What kind of return? We don't know. So that was an advantage. But yeah, so sorry for interrupting you. To Eye to Eye TEFL.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I marched up the stairs of Eye to Eye TEFL, and I met a gentleman and caught him quite by surprise. And he would tell you the story that I said, "Have you any job for me?" And that by the time I turned back down the stairs, that I had a job. But I definitely remember a couple more interviews in between that. But I had researched the company, and it basically had two main offerings. One was you could volunteer abroad, and you could work in community work projects, building projects, teaching English projects, and then you could also get a certification in teaching English as a foreign language. And Eye to Eye was responsible, and Deirdre Bounds, the lady who started that, she was responsible for creating the world's first online TEFL course, and that was in the 90s. And yeah, it still involved a CD-ROM, but it definitely was, I remember those. We used to post out workbooks and CD-ROMs, and it was the first online TEFL course. And so the gentleman that I met at the top of the stairs was her brother, Ian O'Sullivan, and we hit it off. And I worked for Eye to Eye for 5.5 glorious years. It was wonderful. And that company was sold to TUI Travel, and they put it into their activity sector. And they bought a few companies that had a meaningful travel element to it. And so after the Eye to Eye days, we moved on, and both Ian and I, we went in separate directions, but we still stayed in the TEFL industry and helped to create and grow more TEFL brands. And everybody is kind of divided by probably just 1 or 2 degrees of separation, certainly in the UK and Ireland, in terms of offering a really great quality TEFL training. So we all know each other, and sometimes we get phone calls to the office and people are so confused, and they say, just can't decide. I'm looking at Eye to Eye, I'm looking at TEFL.org, and I'm looking at you. And if I catch that phone call and I have all the team are trained to say the same thing, the first thing you tell that person is to reassure them that all 3 of those choices are fabulous. And to bring down the confusion for people, because they're there and they think that there's such an incredible vast choice, and there is. But I think for us, if we can do one thing to demystify the TEFL industry for people, it's our responsibility to do that. And I suppose we will reap the rewards of being transparent and clear with people. So after I moved on to work with another company called TEFL Express, and that was owned by a chain of language schools, and they were spread across the world. And they saw an opportunity where they wanted to rival CELTA at that time. That was the mission of that brand. Now, it didn't turn out that way in the end. But I think that the mission was good, that people had an idea that, there was such a disparity between the online TEFL offering and CELTA, and this 4-week intensive in-person training. And so people in the EFL space wanted to close that gap down and to offer something that could be seen as much more as a rival for that sort of iconic teaching qualification that is still iconic to this day. The CELTA is really, it's up there on a pedestal with gold shining lights around them. But it's only in the last couple of years that we've seen the development of the Level 5 Ofqual regulated online course that would sit on the CEFR, so the Common European Framework of Learning, or what they call the RQF now, the Regulated Qualifications Framework. It's a bit of jargon, but it basically means that there is governmental regulated, verifiable teaching qualifications available now that have a lot more weight. And you can still study them online, which is super. Now, you and I both know that until you get into a classroom and get experience with real learners, that's when you really cut your teeth. You can do all the learning in the world, be the same if we wanted to be motorbike mechanics. You can do all the book learning in the world, but it's only when you get into the actual physical day-to-day doing, that's when you will really hone your skills.
So tell me a little bit after Eye to Eye, what happened next?
Yes, and so I joined TEFL Express, and I was with them for a couple of years, helping to grow them. So I was Director of Operations for TEFL Express, and during that time, with the help of very intelligent people in the EFL space and a Sky News reporter, we developed a purely video-based TEFL course and spent a lot of money doing it, and brought out this really incredible kind of on our own learning platform, custom built in the whole lot. And really it was super. And this was the design that it was going to rival this experience of CELTA. And I think the company, in terms of leadership, wanted to go in a slightly different direction. So at that time, I was actually having my first child, and I took my maternity leave. And I suppose that's a good time to take a break and just review and see what direction I was going in myself personally. And I would always have kept in touch with Ian and been talking. So we actually decided that we had this time working apart, and wouldn't it be wonderful to work together again, because we are aligned in so many ways in terms of vision, values, and the kind of company ethos that we want to create. And there's this underlying feeling that we want to create a place of freedom, autonomy. We want to create a place that is free from cliques or negativity. And we want to get great people who want to achieve things together. And the fact that you spend 8 or 9 hours a day with these people, more than your family or your friends, that you really need to put together a team that is like-minded. And so there's no Sunday night fear in Premier TEFL. Nobody is dreading work the next day. If anything, they might be texting each other to say, can't wait to see you in the morning. It's and I think it's special because people can have great places to work, and I think that's wonderful because it takes a lot of work to create that environment. You have to have zero tolerance for weak links or for people not on board with the ethos. And you have to try and act fast when you spot that the team isn't fully made up of the right people, and that can be difficult. But I think that one of the best things for us coming back together and forming Premier TEFL then is that we got that magic back, that is created between the two of us. Two very different people, two different age groups, two different educational backgrounds, and lots of different experience, but together like a yin yang kind of a thing, we make this perfect harmony, and it's great fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. So for the past 5 years, I've been working on the Premier TEFL business and growing and establishing this as a brand, and it's been fantastic. The reviews that we get from our customers are so positive. The relationships that we have with our customers, we're a small to medium business now, and we have thousands of customers, but we still talk about them by name, and we still know people by name. So when the advisors are talking to the operations team, you're talking about people who are recommending the right TEFL course, and then it moves on to Sandra and her team in operations. And Sandra's giving welcome calls to these customers because she knows that that's important to make a relationship. People find us on the internet, they read reviews and they research us on the internet, they sign up to their course on the internet, and they study on the internet. And so, Phil, where is the human in all of that? Premier TEFL is trying to put the human back into the experience of this. And we're actually doing a lot of research with Trinity College Dublin and their e-learning research centre, Learnovate, this year, about helping people to feel connected in a community during solo e-learning experiences. And so we're investing quite a lot of money in that research piece, and we're hoping that it will carry us for the next 5 years in terms of the learning experience for all of our budding teachers.
And tell me a little bit about the kind of people that work at Premier TEFL. What kind of, you mentioned somebody that doesn't quite gel with the organization, with the ethos of the organization. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
For sure. And I'm smiling, when you say tell me about the people who work there, I'm smiling because, this is a great bunch of people. So for us, what we need is people who are open. They're willing to be, willing to learn, and they're also not going to take things personally. So the types of people we have 2 mothers of twins. So Philip, if you hire a mother of twins, you're getting an incredibly talented problem solver, somebody that can share her attention among a lot of people, somebody who is empathetic, and who will really look after their customers. And so we have Aveen, she's a TEFL advisor. She's on the phones, and she's a mother of twin boys. And then we have Sandra, who's a mother of, it's a girl and a boy, twins, and they're teenagers. So Sandra looks after all of our customers, whether they're on the TEFL course or whether they're teaching abroad. And she has a background in early childhood studies, and she would have run centres in Germany for like creches and early developmental education centres. So her background is centred in education, and then she also has this incredible way about her that she treats all of our customers like they're part of her own family. And so if people are in contact with Sandra, either because they're having a good experience or because they need support in any way, she gets them the support that they need as quickly as possible, and she does whatever she can for any situation. Like we had a call from 5 o'clock on Friday evening, a call from somebody in China who needs their certificate legalized for their visa, and Sandra was about to clock off, and I said, could you just do one more call for me to China? Not a problem, she says. Monday morning she had that person sorted. So I think that in terms of the types of people we have, they go the extra mile. They have a background in education or travel, or a mixture of both. And then also they have a passion for helping people make this a reality for themselves. For example, Sarah, one of our other advisors, she had previously done a bit of travel herself and then joined us, and she had also a background in fitness and training. So different type of education, but she gets the idea of how self-development and coaching is really important. So Sarah, we sent her to Myanmar and Thailand to our teaching placements, and she got an amazing experience out there. Then she came back, and she was back in Ireland for a while, and she decided then that she wanted to take some time out and travel South America. So she trekked Machu Picchu, she travelled down as far into Argentina, and then she went out to New Zealand after that. And so she was actually still working for us in New Zealand, but she was doing the equivalent of a night shift so that we could answer the phones whenever the rest of us were in bed. And now she's back in Ireland at the minute because of COVID. But it just shows that like our advisors are well travelled, they're experienced in this field, and they can give you honest advice because they've already done it themselves. And then we also have some people working on the website and the design. And again, we also try to send those people out to our teaching placements as much as we can so that they can get to experience what it's like. So even our designer has been out to teachers orientation in Thailand so that he can live and breathe what all those new teachers feel too. So great bunch of people, great work ethic, and two key things I'd say about our staff: tolerance and patience. You must have tolerance for all of our differences, and you must have patience because we all have different skills. And I think that if you can form a team that is on board with that message, then you're going to do brilliantly. And I suppose in terms of like our values as a company, the 4 key pillars of Premier TEFL are to promote life-changing experiences, quality education, the ability to make lifelong friends, and also responsible travel. And so these are our external and internal values. We promote it within the team, interchangeably within ourselves, and then also we're promoting it that's what we want to create for all of our customers too.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to do a few quick fire. We're going to do a quick fire round, and I'm going to ask you a few different questions here. And number one is, tell me about the biggest mistake you've made. I like all of us, we've made a lot of mistakes in business. What's a big mistake you've made, and what would you like our listeners to learn from your mistake?
That is such a good question. Okay, quick fire round. I have to just think of something. Biggest mistake. I honestly think, right, I mentioned it a little bit before, I honestly think that when we redeveloped the Premier TEFL website in 2018, we focused way too much on how it looked compared to how it performed in Google. And maybe that doesn't sound like a big mistake, but it does really hamper your ability to reach customers. So that was definitely an error on my side.
And how do you keep motivated?
This is interesting because everybody asks me that question. And I feel like I have had this invisible rocket strapped to my back since I've been a child. And I blame my father for that because he told me constantly, you can do anything and you can be anything. And then couple that with the support of my mother behind that. And I just can't stop. I can't help myself. My husband says it to me all the time. He says, can you just slow down? And I just can't. So I just want to live the fullest life. I think if you were to ask me what's my biggest fear, it would be that I get to the end of this journey and I haven't taken every opportunity that I could have. I haven't maximized it. So, I think, motivation isn't a problem for sure. And when things are tough, I feel more motivated to fix it.
Very interesting. Actually, the few interviews I've done this week, we've done about 4 or 5 already this week, and a few more last week. And there's kind of a common thread here if listeners persist with these podcasts. And Haori-san here in Tokyo, we were speaking yesterday, and she said exactly the same thing, that she's the kind of person. She often thinks that, before she dies, she wants to get all these things done. And she says she won't be happy until she gets all the boxes ticked. And
definitely. I would agree with that. 100%. There is this fear that I'll get to the end of this road and turn back. And if I didn't make the most out of it, we only get this one shot at life. And I think if you have something burning in your belly that you want to achieve, go for it. Go for it, because what is the worst that can happen? Especially in business, the worst that can happen is you go broke And then what you need to do is pick yourself up and you go again. And 90% of startup businesses fail within the first year. But people still start up businesses every day. So there's a thread there, people start up because they have this belief, and you have to have this unquenchable belief in yourself and what your product does. And I think that, we've had failed endeavors and failed businesses and things like that, not putting your commercial plan in fast enough, all these kind of things that you learn along the way. But one failed business idea or one failed business does not make us the man. You're not a failure at that point. You're just somebody who went down a dead end. You entered an attractive looking cul-de-sac, and now you need to circle back out and get back on the main road and get going again.
Pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep going.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, books. You mentioned earlier about some books that you were inspired by and you like to read. Tell me about that. Tell me about the books. Yeah. So
the book I referenced earlier on is called Scaling Up, and it's by Verne Harnish, and it's essentially acquiring and mastering the Rockefeller habits. And so there's this ethos that most companies don't scale past $1 million in revenue or 10 employees. And so this book is all about a roadmap. It's quite heavy, okay, I won't lie to you. This is not an easy thing to get through, but it's a whole program, it's a whole strategy to live by. And so I think for people who are just starting out, or people maybe who don't feel like they have a direction, or they're willing to take the time out and go into like textbook land, then this is a great chance for you to reset. And you can get it on Audible. So you don't have to actually get the hardback. The hardback book is useful to have, but it is also a bit daunting. So it's not something you'd be reading in bed at night. But definitely sign up to Audible, get the book on there. I have probably listened to that book 7 or 8 times, and I have the hardback version too. Yeah, because something, there's so much information in it and so usable. There's a whole section on hiring, and forming your team that you could just listen back to if you were at the phase where you're about to hire somebody new. And it gives you techniques like when you're going to hire somebody, maybe don't use the standard protocol. Maybe make a Google form and ask questions that would help you to know if they fit your ethos and your vision and your values. And if they don't take them for interview. Only really recruit people who are absolutely aligned with what you think is needed to grow your business. And so this is where this 1-page strategic plan lives within this strategy set that Verne Harnish, and you can look them up on YouTube too and watch a few things. They have a really great way of presenting ideas, and I think if you can weave them into how you operate your business, you're bound to grow. I would guarantee it. And then, so that's my go-to book. I think you were going to ask a question.
No, I wasn't. I was just going to make a comment that actually at the moment of hiring a couple of interns, and okay. Actually I have another coming probably from somewhere else. I'm talking to a gentleman next week about it. So this is my first time. I've had editors in the past, and I've worked with a couple of people, but now maybe I have a team of 3-4 people I have to manage, and they're like, what do I do? And I'm going to buy this book. It's a bit daunting.
It is daunting, so definitely go on Audible, download that, and then see if you can get, or even there might be a snippet of it on YouTube. But I think that what I learned definitely was, get more than one reference for somebody that you're hiring. If I was hiring you, Philip, could you find me 6 people who would give you a good reference?
Probably.
Of course you could. Bet you, in a heartbeat you could. So I think that if you developed, for example, a Google form and you asked questions of these people that would give you an insight into whether they're aligned with your goals and how you want the people to be within your team, and then ask them to get 6 people to fill out another questionnaire. I actually have a link. I'm going to send it to you, and then you can maybe make it. Yes,
I'll put
100%.
it in the show notes. So this is a good time, I suppose, to mention the show notes. We'll be a bit podcasty here. Rosie's website is Premier TEFL, that's all one word.com, and in the in the show notes, we're going to put a link to scaling up and hiring. And Rosie, you're going to send me a link as well.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It's probably for my own internal recruitment, but maybe you can take some of the, but that's okay. Yeah. Take some of the questions out and put them in the show notes, and people can see the types of questions to include. And then I have 2 more books as well, because I think 3 is a good number. One, and they're actually just right here beside me. So Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. Now that's a very grandiose title, but I will. Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, and Big Profits. 4 keys to unlock your business potential. And that is by a guy called Greg Crabtree. Okay. Now, this has a foreword by Verne Harnish in this book. So you can see, I'm on the gravy train of Verne. This book, I actually read it when I was pregnant with my second child. So I imagine me up in the hospital waiting for my scans. You have to wait for hours. And I was eating the pages of this book because it just breaks it all down into very simple bite-sized chunks. And it also has sections that are called key takeaways. So you can read the chapter, and then there'll be a key takeaway summary that you can bookmark or highlight, and then you can always flick back to it. But it just gives very simple examples of, for example, when you're starting a business, and say, for example, if you're recruiting people for your team, okay, there's a rule that you only hire when you're desperately in need of that person. We made that mistake that we hired too many people because we thought we would form a team. So we invested in a team too early. And that was wrong, because you should only ever hire a person when you have a full role to give to them and that they're really desperately needed within the company. And so let's just say we've got an entrepreneur out there and their turnover is maybe $500,000, okay? You need to set a cap of what your salary bill can be. And so that might be 150, depending on the network or the way that your company is set up and your own products and the costs and all that kind of stuff. So if you're turning over 500, maybe you could actually only have 90,000 is your cap for salaries. Whatever it is, you need to work out the metric, and you can never go above that, because otherwise you will just go broke. And this is what this book teaches you, is like how not to go broke. And they say that I think it's 5% profit is the new break even, 10% profit is the minimum that you should be going for. But that book is wonderful. It's not a hard read, but it also helps you to think about scaling and wealth and preparing for wealth, and just making sure you're not overpaid or not underpaid. Like in a company, the managing director, the CEO, the owner, you should only be paid a salary that is equivalent to the role that you fulfill. Okay. Dividends, profits, profit share, whatever that is, that's a different story. But just, if you're in your company and the role that you fulfill is a 50 grand role, then you can only pay yourself 50 grand. You can't pay yourself 90 just because you decide you can. And so you need to run the business without emotion, and you need to take your own personal selfishness out of it and run it like a true authentic business, and that's where you'll really do well too. Okay, and that might mean you've got to pay somebody else in your team more than you if they're higher skilled. Be open and aware of that. And then the third book that I want to mention is one called Decoded, and it's the science behind why we buy, and that one is by Phil Bardon. Okay, and what this is, I suppose this is more for people who want to learn a bit about marketing and psychology, because in business, psychology is really important, because we need to understand why our customers are prepared to take certain actions, and we need to understand that our job here is to solve a problem. When you run a business, your job is to solve an important, painful problem for people. If you're not offering a product or a service that removes pain for people, then just be aware that it might not be very successful. We've got to only develop services, products, skills, and offerings for people where there is an issue to be solved. So the science behind why people buy is all about identifying and explaining how we've two parts in our brain. And so essentially we've got an autopilot, and then we've got the stick shift gear driven area, okay? And based on learnt experiences from the past, this enables us to make quick fire decisions. And that's because we have experienced a similar situation in the past, we had a good outcome, and we're going to do that again, okay? Where we are in a new situation and the brain needs to kind of firefight or think on its feet directly in that moment, that's where we engage the system 2. And that's where we have to really use our analysis. And actually it's funny because yesterday I did a workshop and it was all new information and I was exhausted afterwards because I was engaging my active brain the entire time. So in Decoded, it shows you really good pictures of things like maybe a bottle of water and it's maybe got Evian as one side, and then you've got a no brand on the other side, and it will talk about why Evian can charge you £4 for that and the other one can only charge you 23 cents, but actually at the end of the day it's exactly the same material inside that bottle, you know. And it's about the marketing and it's about the presentation and the perception of that. And so it talks a lot about brand recognition and why we pay more for brands, because it brings safety and security, that they've done a good job in the past before, and that's why we're willing to pay a bit extra for it, even though we know we are so clued into the fact that the own label branded supermarket porridge is simply supplied from the big brands at a white label cost. You know, we know that. We're savvy consumers now. You know, we're not we don't believe that Tesco goes and whips up their own porridge oats in the background. That doesn't happen. So you can probably get the same, if not a tiny bit, maybe a tiny bit less quality from own branded things. But time and time again, consumers will pay the big bucks. And actually, we could probably say that about Celta a little bit, that people will pay for that brand recognition and for what they know has been so good previously. And whereby the online courses, it's great that they are a fraction of the price, but you couldn't command €1,500 or £1,200 for that course, because the brand that's in Celta will always maintain that really high price point for people. So that's a great book. It helps business owners, entrepreneurs understand how potential customers will make a choice. And it helps you then to work backwards and say, what messaging do I need to put into my marketing to overcome this? And so those are 3 books that I would highly recommend to new or established entrepreneurs.
Okay, fantastic, Rosie. Great speaking to you again, as always. So Rosie's website is premiertefl.com. Rosie, what's the best way to stay in contact with? You're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Are you all these? Do you like have a business blog? Or
I don't actually. No, I don't have a business blog, but I'm on Twitter, and if people do want to follow me there, I'm not incredibly active. To be honest, Philip, my email address is the best way and the fastest way to reach me, and it's simply Rosie with an IE, Rosie at premiertefl.com. Just one name, like Cher. You know, I'm famous.
Yeah, like me, I have Philip at EFLmagazine.com.
Exactly.
Well.
Let's keep it simple, you know. Yeah. So Rosie at premiertefl.com. If anybody wants to say hi, drop me an email. You know, you don't have to go to social media or anything like that. Just go on ahead and yeah, either let me know if you have questions or share a good book tip that you have for me. Mm-hmm. Or you know, disagree with something that I've said, and I'd be delighted to learn something new. So yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear from some of your listeners.
Okay, Rosie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for listening to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast with Philip Pound. For more great advice and resources, check out EFLmagazine.com. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.